He was just advocating for his daughter Molly with her best interest in mind. He wanted to help her manage her anxiety. But he was basically dismissed by his former spouse, Katie. And here's the message that Dwayne kind of subtly received from Katie. Your perspective isn't relevant and doesn't need to be discussed. She simply dismissed his concern and his perspective. Welcome to the Blended Family Coaching Show, where you'll discover how to move your stepfamily from just surviving to truly thriving.
Grab your headphones and listen in as we share practical, real-life strategies for building healthy bonds,
Understanding the kids' perspective,
romance and partnership,
parenting with great teamwork.
and yes, even co-parenting with a difficult ex.
We're Mike and Kim Anderson, and we believe with the right tools, every step couple can overcome the common challenges of stepfamily life.
Join us for authentic and sometimes comical conversations to discover how you can lead your family with confidence and create the future you really want.
Well, hey everyone, it's finally November and we're back, and we have really missed you and want to welcome you back to spending some time together each week here on the podcast. We hope you've taken some time throughout October to maybe catch up on some missed episodes or go back and review some of those topics that were most pressing for you.
Absolutely.
Now, we heard from many of you over the past month by connecting for a free coaching call. And as always, we're grateful to hear that this podcast is bringing you value. So thanks for that feedback.
Yeah. And you know, we did get a little bit of time off during our strategic pause. We did some fun things.
Sure.
We realized that in the busyness of our work with couples and our own family life that we hadn't spent a lot of focused time together lately, and we'd let our date night routine slide a bit.
We're slipping, yep.
And we know how easy it is to kind of put our relationship on the back burner when we're in a busy season.
Yep.
But we also know the toll that it takes on our romantic relationship and our unity as a couple. So during our strategic pause, we had a few date nights and even a date day, which was really fun, and we enjoyed all that.
That's right.
And this pause we took from releasing podcast episodes was not a month's vacation for us.
Not at all.
No. We were busy working towards serving our coaching clients, planning our content calendar, and even planning some exciting next steps to enhance how we serve couples.
Yep.
And one of the things we're launching this week is just for you, our podcast listeners. Over the next 2 or 3 months, we're going to start releasing an extra mini episode every Friday morning. Yeah.
Yay. So if you're not sick of us already, then you'll really be sick of us. Yeah.
Now we're calling it Simple Steps, and it'll be a 5-minute or less, just a little bit of encouragement or a helpful tip for you as you head into the weekend, right? We know weekends can be stressful for blended families, so we want to equip and prepare you. Now, if you haven't already subscribed or started following the show on whatever platform you're listening on, you want to do that right now, because at this point, this is the only place where we're releasing these little mini episodes, Simple Steps.
It's only for you guys.
Yep. We're not putting them on our Facebook page or website. We're not sending them out in any emails, only here on the podcast. So go ahead and hit subscribe on Apple Podcast or follow on Spotify, and don't miss out on these little mini encouragements to help you move forward. And as we release these over the coming weeks, let us know what you think.
Please, yeah.
Leave us a rating or a review, or send us an email, or even leave some feedback on mikeandkimcoaching.com/share.
Yeah.
We're excited to get your feedback and hear what you think. Now, we've got some other things planned for the coming months as well, but we're going to share more about that at a later time.
Absolutely. And you know, one major focus for us this month was a trip that we got to take to Atlanta to serve alongside Ron Deal and his team at Family Life Blended.
Yeah.
It's this impactful and important annual event for those who serve and support blended families. It's called the Summit on Step Family Ministry. The attendees of this particular event are just like us, right? They're passionate about supporting and helping step families to succeed and thrive. And so we're all kind of there to learn from each other.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah. And at this year's summit, we actually had the privilege of presenting a workshop in one of the breakout sessions that was focused on supporting people who are navigating the challenges of co-parenting with a former spouse. Now, this is a huge topic, which you probably already know, and we only had 90 minutes to cover it. So we decided to focus on a few of the most emotionally charged, difficult dynamics that we've seen divorced parents face while raising their kids from two separate homes.
And we faced as well.
Absolutely. You know, I'm sure that we've all figured out by now that former spouses in a co-parenting situation often bring two different perspectives around parenting decisions, right? And that can easily lead to conflict, pain, and a whole lot of stress.
Yeah.
And when all that flares up, it can cause some relational damage, and not just damage within the co-parenting relationship, but also for the kids' well-being.
Yeah, so it was really exciting, and our presentation at the summit went really well. The feedback was that we brought some valuable insight and some practical direction.
Yeah.
And so we thought we'd share parts of our workshop here with you. And our hope is it'll bring you some value as well. Now, at the summit, we were helping to equip other coaches and those who support couples. But if you're still listening, then chances are you just want some help navigating these difficult dynamics with your former spouse.
That's right.
Or your current spouse's former spouse. Yikes, right? See, it's complicated already. So let's tackle some of these difficult dynamics that often trigger really tough emotions and can escalate conflict between co-parents.
Yep.
And we're going to go ahead and illustrate some of this through the story of one blended family couple we've had the privilege of coaching in the past, and how they were able to navigate some of these really challenging dynamics that came up.
Yeah, all right.
So let's dive in. You ready?
Story time with Mike and Kim.
Yeah. And by the way, we've changed the names in the story just to honor their privacy.
Absolutely.
Now, it was some time ago that Dwayne and his wife Rachel reached out to us for help. Dwayne was struggling through a troubling interaction with Katie, his former spouse. Now, he'd had a few of these challenges in his co-parenting journey with Katie before, but all in all, since their divorce, Dwayne and Katie have been able to create a pretty cooperative co-parenting relationship over the past 10 years. But now, as their two daughters are getting older, they're experiencing some disagreement, and things are beginning to shift in their co-parenting relationship. Now, this particular challenge centered on their daughter, Molly, who struggles with social anxiety. She's in her teens now, and she tends to get anxious in social settings. Lately, though, Molly's been talking about wanting to earn her own money. She has some things that she'd like to be able to purchase, so she's considering the possibility of getting a part-time job. But she's also feeling uneasy because of her social anxiety and what that might look like in a work setting. Now, Dwayne and his current wife, Rachel, they want the best for Molly, and they're really hoping to find some help or some resources to support her in ways that she can cope with her anxiety and be able to get that job and experience a little more of the world and interact with people.
Sure.
Dwayne and Rachel have a lot of empathy for what Molly is feeling, and they also want her to be equipped as she moves towards adulthood. They want her to be able to reach her goals and be successful in life. They want good things for Molly now and in her future.
For sure.
So Dwayne did a little research and found a qualified professional life coach who specializes in helping adolescents and teens manage anxiety. Now, Dwayne is excited about finding this kind of help, and he's briefly connected with the coach already. He feels good about the possibility of getting Molly started with this kind of focused support because he believes it will benefit her greatly. Along the way, as Molly and Dwayne have had conversations about her struggle with anxiety, Dwayne asked about what it might look like to get support from her perspective, and she seemed to be open to this idea of getting help. It even seemed to him that she had some excitement about the possibility of being able to manage her anxiety so that she can get out a little more and maybe even get that job and earn some of her own money. These all seem to be good things, right?
Oh, yes, they do, until until Dwayne approaches this topic with his former spouse, Katie. You see, Katie has a very different perspective, and her response to Dwayne's idea was less than positive. Katie believes that Molly doesn't need this kind of support, and coaching won't help her anxiety anyway. In fact, they had an email exchange here, and Katie commented to Dwayne that If he pushes coaching, she believes that Molly's going to feel judged by him for this struggle with anxiety, and she might even feel like she's broken. It could stir up some feelings of abandonment, that she won't feel accepted by him if he tries to address this anxiety. So Katie was really adamant that Molly will not be doing any kind of coaching or counseling for her anxiety, and this whole thing just needs to be dropped. End of story. Now, as Dwayne read this email, guess what? He was frustrated and he felt a bit hopeless.
Right. Frustration's up, hope went down.
Absolutely. He was kind of mad, too. He felt like Katie was trying to make a unilateral decision without any discussion, and he was left feeling unsure what to do next.
Yeah.
So as you're listening to this story, maybe you find a reflection of some of your own experiences in it. Yeah, the details might be different, but the dynamics could be similar. Maybe you've felt the same things that Dwayne was feeling.
Yeah.
Maybe you've made a suggestion to your former spouse, and with really a heart to support your child, only to have it shot down or ignored. You're not alone. Dwayne's story is many people's story. In fact, it was our story along the way as well. We've lived through these kinds of challenges many times over the past 20 years. So we want to just spend some time today talking about some of the challenges that come with all this.
Yeah, it can be tough. First, let's consider what our overarching goal is, what we actually want to focus on when it comes to navigating our co-parenting relationship with a former spouse. Now, in her book, The Good Divorce, Dr. Constance Aaron shares a framework that can help you to gauge the type of co-parenting relationship that you might currently have with your former spouse, and also give you a picture of what you want to strive for.
Right.
We've discovered in our own journey and through working with lots of couples over the years that co-parents often shift between these different types of co-parenting relationships, depending on, the different developmental stages of the kids and specific challenges, whatever might be going on at that point in time. And there are 5 types that Dr. Aarons identifies. And as we share these, we want you to consider where your co-parenting relationship is right now with your former spouse.
Yeah, let's jump right into that.
Yeah.
The first one is perfect pals. Now, these are good friends. They speak on a regular basis. They plan things together. They might even connect on things that don't involve the kids.
Yeah. The next one is cooperative colleagues. And these are good working partners who share parenting collaboratively. They occasionally spend time together with the children at things like birthday parties or holiday events.
Then there's angry associates. Now, these two tend to talk to each other regularly and try to make joint decisions, but they also tend to argue a lot or feel angry most of the time when they're interacting.
And then we've got fiery foes. This is when we avoid contact as much as possible and are still very angry about the divorce. These co-parents are often not able to work out arrangements for the kids, and they may need a third party, like a mediator or an attorney, to settle their disagreements.
And then finally, there's the dissolved duos. These two generally have no contact with each other, and one parent typically disappears from the child's life. Now, if we want to aim for an ideal goal in this framework and just keep it really simple, what we're really shooting for here is cooperative colleagues, those good working partners who are collaborative for the benefit of the kids. Okay, so with that in mind, let's get back to Dwayne and his former spouse, Katie. You might have noticed that Kim mentioned in the story that they worked quite well together for about 10 years. In fact, for several of those years, just after their divorce, they were perfect pals, often collaborating over a myriad of different things with the girls and other topics of life as well. Now, over time, their communication diminished a little bit, and then there was a significant shift when Dwayne began getting serious with Rachel, and then they were married. And it can be really common that a recoupling of one former spouse is going to cause a shift in their co-parenting relationship. That is very normal. It's very typical. So when Dwayne and Rachel got married, the co-parenting relationship between Dwayne and Katie pretty quickly moved from being perfect pals to cooperative colleagues. And that's okay because they're working together well and they're showing up for the kids well. It's perfectly fine to be there. And they actually remained there for many years. However, this latest disagreement and a few other recent incidences are triggering some emotions and frustrations that started causing them to begin to respond to each other more like angry associates.
Yeah.
That's not what we want.
Yeah. Now, most of us understand that the goal of maintaining a healthy co-parenting relationship is because that's what's best for our kids, right? All the research shows that the outcome for children of divorce is much better on every front when both parents function as the adults and children are not put in the middle or subjected to their parents' hostility. So as you co-parent with your former partner, you'll always want to stay focused on safeguarding your kids. That's the ultimate goal here. But this becomes challenging if your co-parenting relationship breaks down, when you start slipping towards angry associates or fiery foes. The focus tends to shift away from the well-being of the kids and becomes more about the drama and the pain going on in your co-parenting disagreements. And this is when things can get dangerous, not just for your co-parenting relationship, but for your kids as well.
That's right. So today we're going to talk about some of the most common dynamics between former spouses that can quickly become emotionally charged. And we've seen these with people we've coached, and we've personally experienced them in our own co-parenting journey as well. We call these the dangerous Ds, and they can flare up between former spouses and lead to a downward spiral in their co-parenting relationship. These dynamics can be dangerous because if our goal is to work together as cooperative colleagues and safeguard our kids, these dangerous Ds most often lead to a downward descent toward the danger zone of becoming angry associates or even fiery foes. So you need to recognize and own the reality that every interaction with your former spouse and every reaction to a former spouse can either move you upward or downward in your co-parenting relationship. And ultimately, that impacts your kids, either positively or negatively. There's a direct correlation that we all need to be mindful of.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, for today, we're going to describe the dangerous Ds and how they can negatively impact your co-parenting relationship. And then we'll be back next week to focus on practical and healthy ways to respond when these dangerous Ds creep in and threaten to shift your co-parenting relationship into one of the danger zones. So today, you might want to think about which of these dangerous Ds you've been on the receiving end of and how that has been impacting your reaction to your former spouse or your current spouse's former spouse, right?
Again, isn't it complicated?
This applies to bio and step parents. We can all create drama.
That's right. And, if you feel like you and your former spouse are already in the danger zone and you haven't been cooperative colleagues for a while, these 2 episodes might give you some new ways to respond and hopefully improve your co-parenting relationship and make things better for your kids as well.
Yeah, we can all improve.
That's right. Okay, let's jump into the dangerous Ds. The first dangerous D is when a parent is being disregarded. This is when one parent cuts the other parent out of the loop and leaves them in the dark around their child's life. The former spouse neglects to share pertinent information or doesn't include the other parent in things like sporting events or performances or special activities or even milestones. Maybe even things like parent-teacher conferences or doctor's appointments. Basically, anything that a parent would be interested in attending or at the very least should be aware of. Another dad that we coached a while back felt disregarded by his former spouse because she'd pass along information about things like their son's baseball games, but often told him the wrong start time of the game. So here's dad all excited to go watch his son play. He shows up at the field and guess what? The game is already over.
Ouch.
Man, the unspoken message that's being sent to a disregarded parent from that former spouse are things like, you're not welcome, or you don't belong here.
Yeah.
Now, many times this kind of thing is done unintentionally. These can be honest mistakes. Unfortunately, there are times when it is intentional, but not always. You know what? Either way, one parent ends up missing out on something that they feel is really important.
Yeah.
It makes an impact.
Yeah, they're disregarded.
Totally. And there are a lot of emotions that pop up when this kind of thing happens, right? That disregarded parent can feel angry or sad or frustrated or isolated, lots of negative emotions get triggered here. And these emotions are felt on a couple of different levels. First, their former spouses withheld important details of the child's life that they have a right to know. Whether this is intentional or not, that just plain old hurts, right? Yeah. And then there's another piece to this, kind of another pain point that's underneath all of it. And that's all about how the child might be perceiving the situation. So here's dad showing up at the field, realizing the game's already over and Johnny's, my son Johnny's already gone. And he's thinking about, gosh, I wonder what Johnny was thinking the whole game.
Yeah.
Was he wondering why I didn't show up?
Yeah. Was he looking for me out in the crowd?
Absolutely. And now dad is really feeling that pain of going, I wonder if Johnny's questioning my support, or he's questioning my ability to really be there for him.
Yeah, that's really unsettling.
That's unsettling. It's painful for sure. Maybe you've felt disregarded in one way or another by your former spouse. So you probably have a really good idea of how this feels. But let's explore how a disregarded parent might react to that situation in their emotionally charged state of frustration, disappointment, anger. What do you think about that, honey?
Oh, wow. I think if it were me, I'd probably lash out at my former spouse and get really angry. Maybe start with some accusation and blame and criticism, all those things. I might make demands and attempt to change or control my former spouse.
Good luck with that, right?
Yeah, really. And, some co-parents might, resort to playing kind of the tit for tat game, right? I'm going to do the same thing to you and withhold information out of spite or retaliation.
Yeah. I mean, that seems really normal, right? We're emotionally charged. This is really hard. So now I'm ticked and I'm going to react in those ways.
I'll show you.
But if we back up and we think about it, how do you think that kind of reaction, these kind of reactions that you're describing, what's that going to do to the co-parenting relationship?
Well, they're going to quickly enter the co-parenting danger zone and become angry associates or fiery foes.
Okay, so it's counter to what we really want.
Yeah, those kind of reactions are going to feed the fire and escalate the conflict. It's going to go back and forth without any real resolution or anything healthy happening.
Yeah, I can hear the wheels turning in the listeners now going, oh, yeah, that's right. I've been there, right? Well, okay, so that's how it might impact the co-parenting relationship. How's this going to impact the kids?
Oh, gosh. Whenever the co-parenting relationship enters the danger zone of either the angry associates or fiery foes, like this tension, the stress, and the negative emotion between the co-parents, it always impacts the kids. I mean, kids, they observe and see everything.
Sure, yeah.
It causes worry, tension, and stress in them. And in this specific example, dad might resort to bad-mouthing or blaming mom to his son, or even enlisting his son to get information from mom and then pass along the details to him. So now the child is the go-between. He's stuck in the middle. That can be a huge burden for kids, especially younger kids. They just can't handle that. And if these two parents play that tit-for-tat game with each other and intentionally exclude the other parent from the child's activities, guess what? It's the child that will be deprived of having both their parents there to support whatever it is they're doing in life.
Yeah, so ultimately it's the kids who miss out when parents disregard each other, right?
Exactly.
So if you're listening and can relate to being disregarded by a former spouse, think about how you've been reacting to that. Maybe just take some notes and examine how this is impacting your words and your actions. And hold on to those notes for next week when we talk through some practical and some healthy responses to all of this that we're talking about today.
Yeah.
Okay, honey, let's keep going. What's the next dangerous D?
Well, the next dangerous D is when a parent is devalued. Now, this is when a former spouse conveys a belief or an attitude that the other parent's role should be reduced or even eliminated. Ugh. And there's quite a range of ways that this can play out, right? Everything from being unsupportive of the kid's relationship with them, all the way to invalidating their status as a parent and possibly even threatening their parental rights.
Yikes.
And this is dangerous because when a pattern of devaluing emerges, it can negatively impact the parent's relationship with their kids. It creates relational distance or separation between the parent and child that wasn't there before.
Sure.
Now, it might start with things like one parent refusing to allow a visitation and saying something like this to the child. You know, there's a lot going on this weekend, and I think it's better for you to stay here with us rather than going to your dad's house this weekend. Or maybe it's scheduling a vacation that spans over the other parent's time without communicating to them first or making any effort to offer some alternative visitation time to that other parent. And the devaluing of a parent will sometimes reach extreme levels, and there's an intent to slander that parent to the kids with outright lies or malicious stories being told.
Yeah.
A devalued parent usually gets an unspoken message from their former spouse that says, as a parent, you aren't necessary, needed, or wanted. I'm the favored, or I'm the superior parent here, and your involvement isn't important. It's really an invalidating message.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the emotions that a devalued parent might experience when these kind of things are happening.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm guessing a devalued parent's going to feel some shock or panic even, some frustration, of course, disappointment, maybe just plain old angry.
Yeah.
And they might sometimes even be overcome with feelings of sadness or outrage.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe they go one of two ways. They might feel powerless, or sometimes, in the worst of cases, maybe really defeated and heartbroken.
Yeah. I mean, those are all really painful emotions, and a parent's reaction might vary when they're being devalued. Some might fight back with indignation and quickly attempt to set things straight.
I'll show you.
They might try to turn the tables and devalue their former spouse and then work really hard to elevate themselves in an attempt to gain a sense of parental security and worth. Unfortunately, this often happens in some unhealthy and inappropriate ways.
Sure.
Now, other parents on the other end of the spectrum, they might tend to minimize the situation or kind of even go into denial simply because they're emotionally blindsided. And they might be feeling overwhelmed, maybe even paralyzed because of these shifting attitudes towards them, not just from their former spouse, but possibly from their children who might seem to be turning against them and slipping away. You know, I feel my heart racing. My heart hurts just talking about the devalued parent because this was a big part of our journey.
Right.
10 years after my divorce, when my daughter was 12, my former spouse began making some unilateral decisions and speaking in ways that devalued me as my own child's mother.
Right.
It was everything from denying my visitation to placing my daughter in the middle of custody decisions that should have been discussed between just him and me. There were lies told about me and false accusations made.
Yep.
And this escalated rapidly, creating confusion for me and for my daughter as well. And ultimately, this forced us into the family courts for 3 long and painful years. And it did turn into a notable case of parental alienation. Throughout this season, I reacted to the emotions of it all in a variety of ways. I was kind of all over the map.
Yeah, you used the term spectrum before.
Yeah.
You were like on both ends of the spectrum
I was.
multiple times.
There were times when I was full on mama bear. That came out and I got really aggressive and angry. And other times I simply froze in the emotional haze and I became overwhelmed by it all. I mean, there was a lot of disbelief. I couldn't believe it was happening.
Yeah.
Being devalued by that other parent and feeling like your relationship with your child has been stripped from you, this is an extremely painful and confusing place to be.
That's right. You know, this was a tough season for all of us. And if you're feeling like you're struggling with being devalued in some extreme ways, please get some support. You might schedule a free coaching call with us, and we can help you to find the resources you need, and we'll put a link in the show notes for you to do that. And, you know, we know exactly how painful this can be in an extreme situation. And our primary focus today is less on the extremes and more on the common struggles of former spouses in this whole area of being devalued. And in either case, The emotions run high.
They sure
and
do.
some of the reactions that Kim just described can be similar, but just might vary in degree sometimes. And when these kinds of reactions occur, think about how all that might impact the co-parenting relationship.
Mm-hmm.
In those moments when a devalued parent reacts in outrage, former spouses can become competitive over who's the better parent or who's favored more by the kids or whose house is best. And guess what? That's when they're slipping into the danger zones of angry associates or fiery foes rather than striving toward cooperative colleagues.
And if the devalued parent goes into denial and shuts down or avoids the situation, then any kind of healthy collaboration just gets shut down between parents. And of course, there's going to be some resentment and some anger that's going to fester. And eventually that's going to lead to the danger zone of fiery foes or even dissolved duos.
Yeah.
If the devalued parent doesn't take any action, they could end up with decreased visitation time or having their own parental rights robbed from them.
Yeah, and we all know all too well about these dangerous dynamics and how that influences kids, right, honey?
Oh, yeah.
But how would you answer the question of how does this actually impact the kids when the parents are at war with each other like this?
Well, there's an old African proverb that says, when two elephants fight, it's the grass that suffers.
Yeah, for sure.
And this is so true for our kids. When they're put in the middle of two parents who might be competing to gain their favor by bad-mouthing each other or applying inappropriate pressure or expectation on the kids, it puts them into what's called a parental allegiance. Now, step-family expert Ron Deal says that kids are stuck in the dilemma of parental allegiance when they feel the tension of having to align with one parent or the other. The perception of having to choose between mom or dad.
Yeah, so in the midst of just getting trampled by these two warring elephants, it really places them in the middle of this dilemma.
Yeah. Now, this dilemma or bind creates some complex emotions for kids who really, truly want something simple, right? Kids just want to be connected to the people they love, just like we do.
I want that, yeah.
They want to have the freedom to enjoy their parental relationships without any strings attached. They don't want this emotional tension, and they don't know how to handle it. They aren't equipped. Rather than simply enjoying their time with both parents, the kids are now focused on making their parents feel better about themselves. So as kids are moving between their two homes, they want to be able to relax and enjoy each of their families.
Sure.
But in these dangerous dynamics, kids often feel stuck in the middle, often forced to side with one parent and then reject the other.
That's tough.
Yeah, this was so detrimental for my daughter, Annika. And I think it robbed her of a carefree childhood.
Oh, totally.
It really did, because she loved both of her parents and both families, and she wasn't allowed to freely enjoy her relationship with me and with our family.
For quite a while.
Yeah, for a long time, and it caused a great deal of confusion. There were loyalty issues, pain, a lot of emotional damage for her. And if you want to learn more about parental allegiances and how to safeguard your kids, we'll put links in the show notes to 2 previous episodes. The first one is episode 6, Are Your Kids Stuck in a Parental Allegiance and What You Can Do About It?
That's a pretty clear title.
Yeah.
You must have wrote that. Good job.
Yeah. And the second is episode 41, Are You Unintentionally Putting Your Kids in the Middle? That's an important one too, because we can subtly do this without even being aware of it.
Yeah.
So those 2 episodes might help you learn a little more.
That's right. Okay. So that's devalued. Now let's take a look at the final dangerous D, and this is when a parent is dismissed.
Right.
It's when one parent's positive efforts are either overlooked or discredited or rejected by the other parent. Remember that story we were telling earlier about Dwayne? He was just advocating for his daughter Molly with her best interest in mind. He wanted to help her manage her anxiety. But he was basically dismissed by his former spouse, Katie. And here's the message that Dwayne kind of subtly received from Katie. Your perspective isn't relevant and doesn't need to be discussed. That's a painful message, right? At that moment, Katie just wasn't willing to listen or try to understand where Dwayne was coming from. She simply dismissed his concern and his perspective. And you know what? Katie sent Dwayne another message as well. She essentially said, if you move forward or pursue coaching for Molly, it's going to negatively impact your relationship with her. She's going to feel abandoned by you because she thinks you don't accept her the way she is.
Right.
You know, it's actually pretty common for any of these dangerous Ds to come with that added message that your relationship with your child is in jeopardy, which often evokes fear and insecurity or guilt as a parent.
Yeah.
And commonly, this is really a misguided belief about the situation and might even be fueled by some blatant lies from the former spouse, or at least just misjudgment.
Or often they're projecting what they believe onto the other the
that
other
very
parent.
well could be. Absolutely. You know, being dismissed can be frustrating because your motives are good. You're trying to propose something that you feel is positive for this child, but then you might be feeling accused of pushing something that's negative or bad. And so your motive actually gets questioned.
Yeah.
So, honey, what emotions do you think might pop up for a dismissed parent like Dwayne?
Well, unfortunately, I've also felt dismissed by my former spouse, and it's really hurtful. A dismissed parent might feel unheard, ignored, disrespected, or invalidated.
Okay, so if they're feeling all those things, then they probably respond really positively and happily, right?
Not usually.
No? Okay, well then how might they respond?
They might forcefully push their own agenda through
Yeah.
without the support of their former spouse. They kind of say, well, forget
gonna
you.
do it anyway.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. They might adamantly defend their position and then disregard or criticize their former spouse's concerns and shut them down, right? They're going to dismiss them back.
Tit for tat again.
Right.
Yeah.
And when these kind of reactions occur, former spouses usually end up in a power struggle of opposition. They're stuck in the conflict of who's right and who's wrong.
Yeah.
Healthy communication breaks down, tension increases, and they move toward angry associates rather than cooperative colleagues. And that's exactly where Dwayne and Katie were headed.
Yeah. Yeah. And when that type of thing happens, what's going to be the impact of the kids?
Well, this is a dynamic that will sometimes compel that dismissed parent to work out their plan directly with their child behind the other parent's back, right? We're going to get sneaky. So the child is actually coached to be sneaky and asked to keep secrets so that the other parent doesn't find out.
Yuck.
And sometimes kids are given an inappropriate amount of control over decisions that really should be made between the two parents. And this, again, it's a huge burden for kids to be put in that position. They aren't equipped to handle it, and it can create a parental allegiance as well.
And then what often happens is somewhere along the way, somebody, the child or even you, might slip up, and then the other parent's going to discover what's going on.
Yep.
And that's not only going to create more conflict between the parents, but it could have a really negative impact on the child's relationship with you or with that other parent.
Yeah.
Again, the child's caught in the middle of something that should be worked out between the adults. And when that happens, the results can just be detrimental.
Yeah, it's just not good.
Yep.
And something we need to consider that's common to all three of these dangerous Ds and many other trivial issues around co-parenting, right?
Yeah.
We know there's so many issues. But in these tenuous situations, it tends to take both parents' focus away from the care of their children and puts it onto the dysfunction of their co-parenting relationship.
Yeah.
So their personal differences become magnified as the opposition escalates, and then healthy co-parenting breaks down. Former spouses are now focused on the fight rather than collaborating on the well-being of their children.
Yeah. And the reality is that the best way to safeguard your kids is by doing your part to use every interaction you have with your former spouse to move your co-parenting relationship toward cooperative colleagues rather than allowing it to slip toward angry associates or fiery foes.
Yeah.
And believe me, we know this might sound impossible in your specific situation. We've been there.
We have.
It's felt that way to us many times over the years, but we've also discovered that there are positive, practical steps that you can take toward improving the co-parenting dynamics, even if you're experiencing one or all of the dangerous Ds.
Yeah.
You can choose to respond in healthy ways, and we're going to help you discover how to do that in next week's episode. So you really don't want to miss out on that. In the meantime, we want to encourage you to think through each of these dangerous Ds. And if you're on the receiving end of one or more of them, just start thinking through, well, what's happening for you emotionally in those moments? And what are your typical reactions?
Yeah.
Again, maybe you need to take a few minutes this week just to journal that and examine all of those feelings and those reactions, and then save those notes for our discussion next week.
Yeah, that can be so helpful.
Sure.
And one more thing we want to talk about before we wrap up here. Maybe you've been listening and you felt a little convicted today. Maybe you're realizing that you're the parent who is disregarding, devaluing, or dismissing your former spouse.
Yeah.
You might be realizing that the pain from your divorce, or the hurt that's mounted over the years, or the distrust has shaped your interactions with your former spouse, and you're struggling to be a cooperative colleague in your co-parenting relationship.
Yep.
And if that's you, first, I just want to commend you for recognizing it. And I want to affirm that this is all very emotional. This is hard stuff.
Absolutely.
I've been there. I have not reacted well in a lot of these co-parenting issues that we're talking about. And you know, we've said this before, that there's no such thing as a perfect parent. Well, there's no such thing as a perfect co-parent either.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
But if you're realizing that, yeah, I think that's me. I think I'm the one that's kind of doling out these things. Please take some time to consider how you'll make a change for the benefit of your kids. You might need some help with that, and we're here to help. Maybe now is the time you need to schedule a free coaching call with us, or reach out to a counselor or a coach in your area that has specific training or experience with blended family dynamics. But don't ignore that check in your spirit. If you feel that, oh, yeah, I've done that, don't ignore it. You can do something new. You can change these dynamics, and it will help your children.
Totally. Thanks for sharing that, honey. That's good. All right. Hey, we want to thank you so much for joining us today. We are really glad to be back with you after our strategic pause. Now, make sure to check out our first Simple Step mini episode on Friday. And make sure that you don't miss out on next week's episode either, which is going to be really practical. We're going to be sharing a little bit more about our dismissed parent, Dwayne, and how we were able to just coach him and help him to respond to his former spouse, Katie, which helped them to stay out of the danger zone and keep working as cooperative colleagues, even in their emotionally charged dynamics.
Yeah, it can be done.
Yep. So make sure you tune in next week as well. You don't want to miss it. But for now, that makes this episode a wrap.
Until next time.